Well, I think it's a demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk about how that manifests, because that's
I'm also interested in what you just said now, is that you would stand next to anyone who has this. So, Mr. Shapiro, my question to you is, for Ms. Dunston, the tying the noose around the campus and writing messages that target African-American young students, would you consider that hate speech, and then would you stand next to her and fight for her?
Ben Shapiro sat down with a congresswoman who came ready to call him a racist, and in under 3 minutes, she was the one scrambling for an exit. If you want to see what it looks like when identity politics meets logic and loses, you are in the right place. Hit subscribe right now. Thousands of conservatives are already here getting the analysis mainstream media refuses to give you.
Mr. Shapiro, you talked about white privilege, and just this week, I had a conversation with Rachel Lazar, who's done some work, a Jewish American woman who's done some work on this area, as well as having extensive conversations with Dr. Greg Parks of Wake Forest University, who's also talked quite a bit about critical race theory. And it's my understanding that white privilege is not telling individuals that they cannot speak, but it is a term for societal privilege that individuals have as a benefit of their white skin. And I don't think that, and I think universities would be remiss to then say that because you're white, you're not allowed to say anything that's critical of white people. I didn't know that white privilege actually went into that sphere. My understanding is it's just, and the issue is that white privilege makes people uncomfortable to talk about the societal privilege that they have.
Well, to me, what I say on campuses all the time is, if you want to cite instances of racism that we can all find and fight together, that's something that I am more than willing to stand next to you and fight, because that's obviously stuff that we should fight together. But when you just say that there is a white privilege out there in the ether and that by dint of birth your skin color generates for you an advantage, what you're really saying to people is that your view is less valuable because you have not experienced what I've experienced. And that is an identity argument, that's a character argument, that's not a rational political argument that can actually be taken on in any way. It's more of a cudgel and a club than it is an attempt to open a discussion.
Well, I think it's a demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk about how that manifests, because that's
I'm also interested in what you just said now, is that you would stand next to anyone who has this. So, Mr. Shapiro, my question to you is, for Ms. Dunston, the tying the noose around the campus and writing messages that target African-American young students, would you consider that hate speech, and then would you stand next to her and fight for her?
As I say, I would. This is the first I'm hearing about it, honestly. But
really,
yeah. But from hearing about it, maybe because it's local. I mean, I'm from LA. But in any case, I'm more than happy to stand alongside her and fight whatever group was responsible for this. Not only more than happy. I mean, you're talking about the alt-right. Again, I was the #1 target of anti-Semitic harassment from the alt-right last year. So I'm more than happy to do all that. And I think there's one more distinction that has to be made. When we talk about cases like Taylor's, they're horrific, and the administration is siding with Taylor. Okay, the administration is doing the right thing by Taylor, or trying to do the right thing by Taylor, as they should be. And I think that we need to make a distinction between cases where the administration is actively participating in the suppression of speech and cases in which the administration is trying to do the right thing in order to punish people for application of crime.
Let me tell you something. When a sitting congresswoman sits down across from Ben Shapiro and tries to pin the racist label on him, you would expect her to come loaded. You would expect receipts, a clear argument, something. What we got instead was one of the most spectacular intellectual collapses in recent political memory, and we are breaking it down right now. So the Congresswoman opens by citing her conversations with Rachel Lazar and Dr. Greg Parks of Wake Forest University on white privilege and critical race theory. She frames white privilege as simply a term for societal advantage, not about silencing white people. She says, just about acknowledging structural benefit. Fair enough. That is a standard talking point. She has her academics lined up. She is ready to go. Then Shapiro speaks. And this is where it gets interesting. Shapiro does not take the bait on the framing. He does not get defensive. He does not start yelling. He calmly makes a distinction that the left has never had a good answer for. He says, if you want to point to specific, demonstrable, identifiable instances of racism, I will stand next to you and fight them. Full stop. No hesitation. What he pushes back on is the broader, abstract claim that by the mere fact of your skin color, your perspective is inherently worth less because you have not lived someone else's experience. And he nails it. He calls it exactly what it is. An identity argument. A character argument. Not a rational political argument. A cudgel. Not a conversation opener. Now the Congresswoman, sensing she is losing ground on the philosophical exchange, pivots. Classic move. When the argument is not going well, change the subject. She brings up a campus incident involving a noose and targeted messages against black students, a case involving someone named Miss Dumpstone, and she asks Shapiro directly, is that hate speech, and would you stand next to her and fight for her? Shapiro's answer? He says it is the first he is hearing about it. But, and here's where it matters, he immediately says he is more than happy to stand alongside her and fight whatever group was responsible. He goes further. He points out that he was the #1 target of systematic harassment from the alt-right the previous year. This is the man they came in to call racist, the #1 alt-right target. Let that sit for a moment. But Shapiro does not stop there. He adds a distinction that the left consistently refuses to make. There is a difference, he argues, between an administration that actively suppresses speech, which is wrong and worth fighting, and an administration that is trying to do the right thing by punishing actual criminal conduct against students. Those are two completely different scenarios, and treating them the same is intellectually dishonest. The Congresswoman came into this exchange with a narrative preloaded. She had her academic sources, her societal privilege framework, and what appeared to be a calculated attempt to position Shapiro as someone uncomfortable with accountability on race. What she got instead was a man who refused to be caricatured, who drew clear distinctions, who acknowledged real racism without hesitation, and who turned every one of her pivot points back into a coherent conservative argument about individual merit, rational discourse, and the limits of identity-based reasoning. This is what happens when the left comes armed with talking points and meets someone who came armed with logic. White privilege as a concept is not just a sociological observation to its advocates. It is a rhetorical weapon designed to preemptively delegitimize anyone who disagrees. Shapiro identified that live on camera and said so plainly, and the Congresswoman had no answer. She moved on, because that is what you do when the argument runs out. The American people are tired of being told their perspective does not count because of the color of their skin. They are tired of debates that start with a conclusion and work backwards. And they are certainly tired of being called racist by people who cannot survive a 10-minute conversation with someone who actually reads. That is the bottom line. Stay with us.